This video is going to be on constructing and answering questions on two-way tables. Okay, so this first section, we're going to be looking at completing partially completed two-way tables. So as you can see in the question, we've got our two-way table and most of the data's there, but our job is to try and fill in all of the missing numbers. Okay, so the way I like to do this is I like to look at all of the different columns first. And what I'm searching for is a column that only has one bit of missing data. Now, as I move along, okay, I quickly go and see that physics is missing one piece of data, and that's the total. So in order to find this out, all I need to do is I just need to add the two numbers 7 and 6, which is 13, and that will give me my total. Now moving along to chemistry, you can see I'm missing 2 bits of data. Okay, so I can't do anything there. But biology, I'm only missing 1 piece of data. So what I'm going to do here, instead of adding, because I've got the total already, I'm going to actually have to do something a little bit different. So this time I'm going to take the total and I'm going to take away the other value for the girls. So I've got 17 take away 12, which is 5. And that will give me how many boys are in biology there. Okay, so looking at the last column, you can see again I've got 2 bits of data missing. So again, I can't do anything more. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to switch to using the rows. Now, looking at the rows, I'm looking for exactly the same sort of thing. I'm looking for a row that has got 1 piece of data missing. Now, looking at the boys row, you can see that I've got the total missing. So what I'm going to do here is add up the 3 numbers to get the total. So that's 7 and 8, which is 15, plus a 5 is 20. So my total for the boys is 20. I'm now going to move down to the girls row, and as you can see again, I'm missing 1 piece of data. This time it is not the total, so I'm going to take away. But I've got 2 numbers that I need to take away from 30, so I'm going to do this 1 bit at a time. So I'm going to start by doing 30 take away 6. 30 take away 6, okay, I can't do 0 take away 6, so I need to borrow. And 10 take away 6 is 4, 2 take away 0 is 2, so I'm left with 24. But remember, I've got 1 more number I need to take away from this, and that's 12. So I'm going to do 24 take away 12. Now 24 take away 12, 4 take away 2 is 2, 2 take away 1 is 1, so I end up with 12. Looking at the bottom row, the total, okay, I've got 2 bits of data missing. So now I'm going to go back to looking at columns. Okay, so looking at columns, as you can see, because I've just completed those rows, the chemistry now has only got 1 bit missing, just like the total. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the 8 and the 12 for the chemistry to get 20. And I'm going to add the 20 and the 30 for the total to get the whole total, which is 50. Now this 50 is a very important number here because this is actually the total amount of data in the entire two-way table. So that is how many boys and girls there are in total. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm just going to ask you to pause the video and I want you to have a go at this question here. As you can see, okay, this time there are 3 rows and 3 columns with totals added at the end, and the numbers are slightly bigger, but I want you to take your time, starting with the columns, then moving to the rows, and see if you can complete it. Okay, so pause the video now, give it a go, and then we'll go through the answers in a moment. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that. So first off, what we're going to do is look at the columns. So if you notice, school A has 1 thing missing, okay, but it's not the total. So what I need to do is I need to do 191 and take away 85. So I'm going to do that first, and doing 191 take away 85, it gives me 106. After I do that, I'm going to do 106 take away 13. Okay, and doing that, I get 93. So I should have 93 in there. Hopefully you did too. Okay, looking at school B, I've got the total missing. So this time I'm going to add all of the numbers up. So I've got 29, 31, and 5. Add all those together, I get 15, 6, 65. Looking at the other two columns, I can't do those, so I'm now going to switch to rows. Okay, so looking at the very first row, you can see I'm just missing the total, so I'm going to add those numbers up, and I get 168. Looking at the bottom row, I'm missing the value for school C. So I'm going to use the grand total, take away 65, which is 301, take away 191, which is 110. Now I'm going to move back to the columns, and you see that what I'm just missing is just the teachers' values. So starting with school C, I'm going to do 110, take away 47, and then I'm going to take away 54, and I end up with 9. For the last column, I'm going to have 366, take away 171, which is 195, and take away 168, and I get 27. So hopefully you got those answers as well. If you didn't, I suggest that you go back and you have another little go and just see where you went wrong. Okay, let's move on to the next section. Okay, this next section doesn't look like it's a two-way table question. In fact, there's a lot of data here, and most students get very confused. They put a couple of calculations down, and they think this is really tough, and then they give up. Okay, but actually, if you spot that this is a two-way table question, this question becomes quite easy to do. So first off, how do we spot it? Well, firstly, there is a whole load of data here. Okay, and the data is split into two different sections. So the first section is that there are 100 students in year 10 and 11. So the 100 students are split into 2 years, year 10 and 11. The second way they are split is in what they do for lunch. So we've got some students that eat school lunch, some students go home for lunch, and then some students have packed lunch. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to quickly make a very rough two-way table. Okay, and I suggest that we put the years on the side because there's only 2 of them, so it should fit a bit nicer there. Okay, and then up the top as the column headings, we're going to have school lunch. Don't have to actually put the full title in. Home for lunch and packed lunch. Okay, so we're only missing 2 more titles, and that is the total down the bottom and then the total at the top. Okay, so we're now ready to start filling in our data. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at the very top here. So 100 students are in year 10 and 11. Now that's the grand total, and that's going to go down the bottom right here. So 100 students are in year 10 and 11. Okay, the next one, okay, the first line that gives us the data is that there's 32 year 11 students that eat a school lunch. So I need to look in the year 11 row and the school column to put 32. The next bit of data tells me that there are 50 students in year 10. So this is in the year 10 row, and it is the total number of year 10 students. So I'm going to put 50 there. The next one tells me that there are 9 students that go home for lunch. So this again is the total, but it's of the column row. So I'm going to put 9 as the total for home. The next one is a little bit more confusing because there are 2 numbers. There's 8 out of 26, that have packed lunch are in year 10. Now, I've got packed lunch as the column and year 10 as the row. Now, one of these numbers is the total, and it's the total of packed lunch. And if you think about it, only one of these numbers could be a total, okay, and that would be 26. Okay, the way 8 couldn't be a total is because if 8 was a total and then I was putting 26 in for year 10, then there's no way that the data could be bigger than the total. So the bigger number is going to be the total. So I still need to put in 8, which is year 10s that have packed lunch. Okay, now I'm going to complete the two-way table just like I did in the last section. But the good thing about this question is it's not asking me to complete the entire table. Instead, it's asked me a specific question. How many students in year 10 have school lunch? Okay, with a question mark there. Well, it should. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this number here. So if I can just fill in the table, okay, and get that number, I don't need to fill in any other ones. And what I'd really like is to have the total for school down here. If I have the total down here, then all I need to do is take away 32 and I've got it. And if you notice, I can actually work this out because this total row has only got this school total missing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 100, take away 26, and then after I've done that, I'm going to take away 9. So first off, let's deal with this. Now, okay, I can't do 0 take away 6, so I'm going to have to borrow, but there's nothing I can borrow from the next number, so I'm going to have to borrow from the one before that. So now I can. I've got 10 take away 6 is 4, 9 take away 2 is 7, so I've got 74. But remember, I've still got to take away that 9, so 74 take away 9. Again, I can't do 4 take away 9, so I'm going to borrow. Okay, 14 take away 9 is 5 and 6. I would still recommend using the column method to do any takeaways or adds, just it gives you an extra element of security. Okay, so now I've got the total for school. In order to answer the question, I just need to take 32 away from it. So that's what I'm going to do. 65 take away 32. Now if I do this, 5 take away 2 is 3, 6 take away 3 is 3. So my answer here for school, year 10 students that have a school lunch, okay, it's 33. So I'm just going to make sure that this is highlighted, so I might write it down in the corner and just make sure that they know it's the answer by putting a double underline under it. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is to pause the video, okay, have a little go at this question here, okay, and then we'll see how you got on in a moment. Okay, so for this question, I'm going to quickly just make a table up for this. Okay, so there's my table quickly made up. So you can see the data is split into people that swim, play squash, and go to the gym, and then it's also split into male and female. So let's put this data in, starting with the 50 people that each did one activity at the sports centre. Well, that is the grand total down the bottom here. Okay. The next bit of data actually comes down here. 21 of the people were female. Well, that's the total of the female group. Now then, we've got this complicated one where 6 out of 8 people who played squash were male. So this again, if you remember, one of those is the total of the people who played squash. And it only makes sense that the total, oh, forgot to write that, total of the people that played squash should go down the bottom here, and it's the bigger number 8. So 6 of those 8 were male. Okay, so the next bit is the 18 of the people who used the gym. So again, 18 people that used the gym is the total. That's 18 here. Lastly, 9 males went swimming. So 9 males went swimming, 9 in men. Okay, so what's the question actually asking us to find? Well, the question's asking us to find the number of females who use the gym. So that's this little section here. Now, really what I want is I want to find out this part here, which is how many men went to the gym. If I can find that out, I just need to take that number away from 18 and I'll get the number of women. But I can't do that just yet. In fact, what I need to do is I need to work out this total. If I find the total number of men, then I can work out the total number of men that use the gym, and finally find the total number of women that use the gym. And I can find this because if you look at the column, I'm missing one piece of data. So I'm going to start off with this one, and that's going to be 50 take away 21, which borrowing, I get 29. So now I'm going to find out how many men use the gym by doing 29 take away 9, which is 20. And then I'm going to do 20 take away 6, which is 14. Now finally I can go to answer the question because I've got 18 people that use the gym in total. 14 of those were men, and so that means 4 were women. So I'm just going to put a 4 and double underline it to make sure the examiner knows that that was my final answer. Okay, so 4 people used the gym. Okay, so this last section we're just going to look at the extra types of questions that could come up about two-way tables. So they usually come up asking for fractions, percentages, sometimes they use the word proportion, or they ask for a probability. So we're going to take these one at a time. So let's start with the fractions question. Okay, so the fractions question asks you to write the fraction students that chose chemistry. So what we need to do is we need to identify the total and the amount of people that chose chemistry. So there's 50 people in total and 20 chose chemistry. So writing that as a fraction, we have 20 out of 50. Remember, when you do fraction questions, usually a marker is related to simplifying that fraction. So here, 20 and 50, they're both in the 10 times table, so we can cancel a 0 from both the top and the bottom, and we get the fraction 2/5. Okay, so the percentages question, okay, is going to rely on you being able to change fractions to percentages. So if you don't know how to do that, or you've forgotten how to do that, then I suggest you look at another video which shows you how, or you have a little bit of a practice. Okay, so this one's asking you to write the percentage of boys that chose physics. Now, if you notice for this one, okay, we're looking at the boys that chose physics, but the thing is, we're not actually doing this out of the grand total. We want to find out the percentage of the boys. So there are 20 boys and 7 chose physics. So we're going to write that first as a fraction, 7 out of 20. Now we want to actually change this fraction to a percentage. And the way we do this is by timesing by 100. Now with a calculator, you can just use your fraction button and times by 100. But without a calculator, it's probably easiest to do a bit of cross-simplifying. So the way we do this is, if you remember, we can simplify up and down. 7 and 20, though, doesn't have anything that can simplify it. But if we look diagonally, 120, they do. 120 both share the factor 20. So if we divide both numbers by 20, we end up with 1 and 5. So this calculation now becomes doable in our heads, which is 7 times 5 divided by 1, which is 35%. Proportion questions are basically exactly the same thing as percentage questions. We can write a proportion as either a percentage, or we could write it as a fraction. So let's do it as both. So for the proportion question, it's asking for the proportion of students that are girls. So there are 30 girls out of 50. So we could write this as 30 out of 50, which is 3/5 if we simplify it, or we could write it as a percentage by doing 30 out of 50 out of 100 out of 50 and times it by 100. Dividing the 100 and the 50 by 50, we get 1 and 2, which gives us a percentage of 60%. Lastly, the probability question. Now, the probability question is exactly the same as what we've been asking for before. It's basically a fraction. Now, to answer the probability questions is exactly the same, but let's just make sure that we're writing it with the correct notation. So first off, we want to find what's the probability that a random girl selected chose biology. So we're going to say the probability that a girl chose biology. And that's going to be a fraction. So we're going to identify the amount of girls, which is 30, and there were 12 that chose biology. So if you remember, probabilities usually we like to write as fractions. So 12 out of 30, which I believe 6 is the highest common factor of both of those. So divide them both by 6. So we've got 2 and 5. So we've got the probability of a girl doing biology is 2/5. Right, so what I want you to do now is to have a little look at this question and pause the video, have a go, and we'll go through the answers in a moment. Okay, so to start with, before we answer any of these questions, we have to complete the two-way table. So as soon as we've done a lot of practice on this, I'm just going to do the answers right now. Okay, so there we go. Those are the answers to the missing values in the two-way table. So now I'm asked to work out the fraction of men that travel by car. So I'm going to identify that there are 28 men, 10 of them travel by car, so the fraction will be 10 out of 28. Okay, remember to simplify this, divide them both by 2, 5 over 14. Okay, so work out the proportion of people that travel by train. Remember, you've got the choice now of doing a fraction or percentage. I think the fraction is probably one of the easiest ones to do. So the proportion of people that travel by train, there are 23 out of 50. So 23 out of 50 would be the fraction. If we wanted to do this as a percentage, it's not going to be too hard. We just times it by 100. And luckily for us, 150, both will cancel. So 50 goes into both. So there's 1 and 2. So this calculation becomes 23 times 2, which is 46%. Okay, so lastly, if a random woman was selected, what would be the probabilities that she travels to work by bus? So firstly, we want the probability that there's a woman that travels by bus. So let's just quickly write that in. Now remember, probabilities, we're looking for a fraction answer. So it's basically the same as question A. So we're looking for the women, okay, where there's 22 of them, and how many of them travel by bus, which is 7. So the probability would be 7 out of 22.